Stepping out of the restroom, I had no reason to expect my world to shatter in the next few seconds. The dimly lit restaurant buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of jazz music playing in the background. But my focus zeroed in on our table, the one I had left just minutes ago. There she was, Jessica, my wife of 7 years, sitting in my seat, nestled comfortably in the arms of another man. His hand rested on her thigh, his lips too close to her ear, whispering something that made her giggle like a high school girl with a crush. The way she leaned into him, her fingers grazing his wrist, sent a nauseating wave through my gut. "What the hell are you doing in my chair?" My voice cut through the noise, loud enough to turn a few heads. Jessica barely flinched. She tilted her head, batting those same green eyes that once made me weak in the knees. "Darling, find another place." The stranger, a smug-looking guy in an expensive suit, smirked as if I was the intruder at my own table. My fists clenched on instinct, blood boiling under my skin. But the worst part wasn't him. It was her. Jessica didn't look guilty. She didn't look caught. No, she looked annoyed. A few nearby tables caught wind of the tension, whispering, watching, waiting for the scene to unfold. Then, laughter. Laughter. A group of men at the bar, a couple at the next table, chuckling like this was some sitcom, and I was the clueless fool who had walked in on his own humiliation. Something inside me snapped. Before I even processed it, my hands gripped the bastard's hair, yanking him out of the chair with all the force in my body. His smirk vanished as he hit the floor with a dull thud. I didn't stop there. A crushing blow to his jaw sent his head snapping back, and before he could even groan, I drove my heel straight into his groin. The laughter died instantly. Jessica shrieked, jumping up from her seat, eyes wide, not in remorse, not in regret, but in pure, indignant rage. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screeched, shoving me back. "You're embarrassing me." I wiped my hand across my mouth, steadying my breath. "Embarrassing you?" My voice was eerily calm. "Jessica, I just caught you draped over another guy in front of a crowd, and I'm the problem?" She huffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, come on, Liam. Don't be dramatic. It's just a friend." The guy groaned from the floor, holding his face, but I ignored him. My eyes burned into her. "Friends don't touch each other like that, Jessica." Her lips curled in a smirk. A smirk. Like this was a game. Like she had already won. "Maybe if you paid a little more attention to me," she purred, smoothing her dress, "I wouldn't have to find someone else to do it." The words sliced deeper than any punch I could have thrown. Something inside me twisted, something dark and unrelenting. But this was just the beginning. The show was only getting started. The room still crackled with tension. People stared, their whispers a buzzing backdrop to the chaos unfolding at our table. The bastard on the floor groaned, rolling onto his side, but my attention stayed locked on her. Jessica, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted, stood before me with that same condescending smirk, as if I were the punchline to some cruel joke. The rage burning inside me begged for an outlet, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't the time to lose control. Not yet. She scoffed. "Are you going to keep standing there like a fool? Or are you going to sit down so we can talk like adults?" A bitter laugh escaped me. Adults? Oh, that was rich. I glanced at the bastard still struggling to sit up, his nose already swelling. Is he part of this adult conversation too? Jessica crossed her arms. "His name is Ryan. And, honestly, you're overreacting." Ryan. I rolled the name in my mind, trying to remember if she had ever mentioned it before. She hadn't. That meant one of two things. Either she was careful enough to hide him, or she had so little respect for me that she didn't even bother. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "How long?" She blinked. "Excuse me." I didn't repeat myself. Jessica sighed, like I was inconveniencing her. "Liam, it's not what you think." "How long?" Something flickered in her eyes, annoyance, not guilt. She was tired of pretending, not sorry for what she'd done. "A couple of months." The words landed like a punch to the gut. I exhaled through my nose, trying to stay steady. "So while I was working late, while I was planning our future, you were—" I clenched my jaw, unable to finish. Jessica shrugged. "Don't be so dramatic, Liam. It's just some fun. You know, excitement? Something we've been missing for a while." The audacity of her words sent a white-hot flash of rage through me. My hands curled into fists at my sides, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me snap. Ryan finally managed to sit up, rubbing his jaw. "Hey, man," he mumbled, voice thick with pain. "I didn't know she was married." Jessica shot him a sharp look. Liar. I didn't believe him for a second. Men like him always knew. They just didn't care. Is that right? I asked, my tone ice cold. So you just thought she was some single woman looking for fun? Ryan hesitated, glancing at Jessica, but I already had my answer. Liam, Jessica interrupted, stepping between us. You're embarrassing yourself. Let's just go home and talk. I stared at her, searching for even a shred of remorse. Nothing. Just impatience, irritation, disrespect. My chest tightened. Home. I repeated. Our home? The one I've been paying for while you sneak around with this guy. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. Don't act like you're some perfect husband. My breath hitched. What's that supposed to mean? Jessica tilted her head, expression smug. You're predictable, Liam. Boring. You work. You come home. You talk about the same things every day. Where's the passion? The excitement? A sharp laugh escaped me. Oh, I'm sorry, Jess. I didn't realize excitement meant stabbing your husband in the back. She sighed. You're being dramatic again. I clenched my jaw so tightly my teeth ached. Every word out of her mouth was a slap, but worse than that, she meant them. Jessica never had any intention of stopping. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was bored. And that made me sick. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, I'll just... I snapped my glare to him. You'll just what? His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. Good. I turned back to Jessica. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your friend and get the hell out of my sight. Jessica arched a brow. And if I don't? I stepped in close, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Then you'll wish I was still the boring, predictable man you think I am. For the first time that night, her confidence wavered. She glanced at Ryan. Come on, let's go. He hesitated but followed her, still clutching his jaw. As they walked past me, Jessica had the audacity to smile, not in amusement, but in victory. She thought she had won. She thought this was over. But she had no idea. The real show was just beginning. Jessica and Ryan strolled out of the restaurant like they had just wrapped up a pleasant dinner date, not like they had just shattered my world in front of a crowd. I stood there, fist clenched, heart pounding, every nerve in my body screaming at me to do something. But what? What was there to do when the woman you build a life with just shrugged off your existence like an old jacket? The murmur of voices around me grew louder, the restaurant patrons no longer whispering but openly discussing what they had just witnessed. Damn, that was brutal. Man, if that were my wife, I'd Poor guy. She didn't even look guilty. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their words. I needed to get out of there before I did something I would regret. My car was parked down the street, but I barely remembered the walk to it. My mind was a battlefield, rage clashing with heartbreak, confusion wrestling with clarity. Sliding into the driver's seat, I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had to think. Had to be smart. Jessica was counting on me to brake. I could still hear her voice in my head, calm, condescending, unbothered. You're being dramatic, Liam. Was I? Was I the one ruining our marriage? No. Hell no. I exhaled slowly, resting my forehead against the wheel. I needed answers. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. So I drove home. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, calm, quiet, normal. But nothing about it was normal anymore. I stepped inside, my senses heightened, eyes scanning every detail as if I were seeing it for the first time. Had she brought him here? Had he sat on our couch, touched our bed, left a scent lingering in the air? My stomach twisted at the thought. I walked into the bedroom and threw open Jessica's closet. If she had been lying about everything else, what else was she hiding? My hands tore through her drawers, through the neatly folded clothes and perfume bottles. And then I found it. A second phone. Small, sleek, tucked away behind a shoebox. My pulse spiked. I turned it on. No passcode. She must have been too arrogant to think I would ever find it. Messages flooded the screen, the latest one from Ryan. Can't wait to see you again. Tonight was amazing. My throat tightened. Tonight. We should have left sooner. Your husband's such a joke, LOL. I squeezed the phone so hard I thought it might snap in my grip. Scrolling up, I saw more. So much more. Ryan wasn't the first. There had been others. At least 3. Names I didn't recognize. Different places, different messages, the same disgusting game. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was who she was. And I had been blind. A sound broke through my thoughts, the front door unlocking. Jessica was home. I shoved the phone into my pocket and stepped out of the bedroom just as she walked in, heels clicking against the floor. She froze when she saw me, surprise flashing across her face. What are you doing here? she asked, setting down her purse. I stared at her. The audacity. I live here, I said, voice dangerously low. She sighed, already exasperated. Liam, if this is about earlier. It is. I took a step forward. And about this. I pulled the second phone from my pocket and held it up. Her face drained of color. For the first time tonight, I saw something new in her expression. Panic. Where did you get that? She demanded, voice sharper than before. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. That's what you're worried about? Not what's on it. She straightened her shoulders, her lips pressing into a thin line. Give it to me. I ignored her, turning the screen on and reading aloud. You're so much better than him. He's boring. You make me feel alive. Jessica lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Don't. My voice stopped her mid-motion. Silence stretched between us. Then she laughed. Laughed. You're seriously going through my things now, she sneered. God, Liam, do you even hear yourself? You sound crazy. I gritted my teeth. Crazy? You've been sneaking around with other men for months, years, and I'm the crazy one. She crossed her arms. Maybe if you weren't so paranoid, I wouldn't have had to. Paranoid. The word nearly made me lose control. You know what, Jessica? I exhaled slowly, the storm inside me reaching its peak. I was ready to fight for this marriage. I was ready to believe maybe this was just a mistake. But it's not, is it? Her silence was answer enough. I shook my head. You never loved me. Not really. Jessica scoffed. Oh, please, Liam. Love? What even is that? Comfort? Security? Because that's all you ever were. Safe. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. Safe. That was all I had been to her, a convenience. A backup plan while she entertained herself with real excitement. My jaw tightened. Then consider me gone. Jessica blinked. What? I turned toward the bedroom, grabbed my keys and the duffel bag I had packed earlier with the essentials. I'm done. You want excitement? Have all of it. Have Ryan. Have every man on that phone. But you won't have me. Jessica's smirk returned, though there was a flicker of something behind it, uncertainty. Oh, please. You'll be back. I met her gaze one last time. No, Jessica. I won't. And with that, I walked out the door. But this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and sobering. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I walked away from the house that, until an hour ago, I thought was my home. The streetlights cast long shadows as I reached my car, but my hands trembled too much to put the key in the ignition. Everything in me screamed to keep moving, to disappear, but something held me there. A nagging feeling clawing at my gut. Jessica didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't even get angry. She just stood there, smirking as if she had one. And that's when it hit me. She wanted me to leave. I sat back in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel. Why? I had caught her cheating. I had the proof. But instead of panicking, she was calm. Too calm. Something wasn't right. I yanked out my phone and scrolled to my banking app. My stomach dropped. My joint account, the one Jessica and I shared, was empty. Completely wiped out. I swiped to check my credit card. Maxed out. My blood turned ice. I checked my emails next. A new message from my lawyer, a divorce filing. From Jessica. Time slowed. My hands felt numb as I read through the document. She had filed it weeks ago. She had everything planned, my money, my house, my life. And I had walked right into it. The realization was a hammer to my chest. Jessica hadn't been careless. She had been setting me up. The affairs, the attitude, the public humiliation, it wasn't just boredom. It was a distraction. She wanted me angry, wanted me to storm out, wanted me to react, to make a mistake. And I had. I had left on my own. Now she had control. I gritted my teeth. No, not yet. I wasn't going to let her win. I forced myself to breathe. Think. If Jessica wanted me gone, that meant there was something in that house she didn't want me to find. And I was about to find it. Leaving my car parked down the street, I moved quickly, cutting through the neighbor's yard. The security cameras covered the front of the house, but Jessica never thought I'd be desperate enough to break in through the back. I climbed the fence, landing softly in the backyard. The kitchen light was still on. She was inside. I needed to be fast. Slipping through the side entrance, the one she always forgot to lock, I moved into the house silent as a shadow. Jessica's voice drifted from the living room. It's done. He left. Just like we planned. I froze. She was on the phone. My pulse spiked as I edged closer, staying hidden behind the hallway wall. Jessica laughed. He thinks he's leaving me. Can you believe that? Like he actually had a choice. A pause. Then, I'll have the paperwork finalized next week. Everything will be in my name by then. A slow, sinking feeling clawed through my chest. She hadn't just wiped me out. She was taking everything. My house. My accounts. My business. Jessica never wanted a divorce. She wanted me ruined. I clenched my jaw. Not today. I had to find proof, evidence that would destroy her plan before she destroyed me. And I had to do it now. Moving quickly but quietly, I slipped into her office, the one place I had never been allowed. She always claimed it was for her work, but now I knew better. I rifled through her desk. Bills, contracts, nothing useful. Until a manila envelope. My breath caught as I pulled it out, flipping it open. Bank statements. Not just for our accounts, but for accounts I didn't recognize. Offshore transfers. Deposits in her name. Tens of thousands of dollars. I scanned the transactions, my heart hammering. She had been funneling money for months. And then, at the very bottom, a life insurance policy. With my name on it. I swallowed hard. A $500,000 payout. Jessica wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was planning for me to disappear. The air left my lungs as the realization settled in. This wasn't just revenge. This was a setup. And if I didn't play this right, I might not make it out alive. I slipped the envelope inside my jacket and turned to leave, but then a floorboard creaked behind me. I barely had time to react before something slammed into the back of my head. Stars exploded in my vision. I hit the ground hard, the world spinning as a sharp pain radiated through my skull. A shadow loomed over me. Jessica, holding a fireplace poker. She smiled. You just couldn't let it go, could you? Pain exploded at the base of my skull. My vision blurred as I struggled to push myself up, but my arms felt like dead weight. Jessica stood over me, gripping the fireplace poker with a smirk that sent a cold shiver down my spine. She had never looked at me like this before. Not with annoyance. Not with boredom. With victory. You should have just left, Daniel, she said, tilting her head. But you never knew when to quit. My breathing was ragged. The world was tilted, the room spinning, but I forced myself to focus. I couldn't black out. Not now. She crouched beside me, tapping the poker against the floor. Mocking me. I was really hoping you wouldn't find that folder. Now you've put me in a difficult situation. I swallowed hard. So what? You were just gonna, what? Wait for me to disappear? Collect a nice payout? Her lips curled into something almost amused. Something like that. A dark chuckle escaped her throat as she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. You were always so predictable, Daniel. My fingers curled into fists against the carpet. Why? My voice was hoarse, raw with the weight of betrayal. Why do all this? Jessica sighed, rolling her eyes as if I had just asked her something inconvenient. Because you're weak, she said simply. You never saw it, but I did. Every single day. A pathetic, trusting fool who thought love was enough. Newsflash, sweetheart, love doesn't pay the bills. She stood, adjusting her silk robe, as if she hadn't just confessed to planning my downfall. I gritted my teeth, pushing myself up onto my elbows. You could have just left. Taken what you wanted and left. Jessica scoffed. And what? Start over from scratch? Do you know how long it took me to build this life? To make sure I would never have to worry about money again? Her eyes darkened. I wasn't about to let you ruin it. I forced out a laugh, despite the pain in my ribs. You really think you're going to get away with this? Her smirk widened. I already have. And then, from behind her, a voice I wasn't expecting. Jessica. Jessica froze. I turned my head slowly, heart hammering against my ribs. There, standing in the doorway, was Ryan. Her lover. He was still dressed from their little date night, his suit jacket hanging loosely over his shoulders, confusion etched into his face. But that confusion quickly turned to horror as his gaze dropped to me, sprawled on the floor, and then to the fireplace poker in Jessica's hand. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica's face flickered through a dozen emotions at once: shock, panic, calculation. And then, she sighed, rolling her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, Ryan, don't look at me like that, she said, shaking her head. This isn't what it looks like. Ryan blinked. It looks like you just tried to kill your husband. Jessica scoffed, tossing the poker onto the couch like it was a toy she was bored with. Oh, please. Don't be so dramatic. I couldn't believe it. She had no shame, no fear, not even a flicker of regret. Ryan took a step closer, voice quieter now. Jessica, what the hell is going on? She turned toward him, shoulders relaxing, adopting a softer expression. The way she switched gears was almost impressive. Almost. Baby, she purred, placing a delicate hand on his chest. You know how stressful this divorce has been. Daniel he wasn't taking it well. He broke in. He attacked me. Ryan's brows furrowed. You mean, you didn't? Jessica let out an exaggerated sigh, squeezing his arm. I was just defending myself. Then she shot me a look, cold and deadly. Wasn't I, Daniel? I clenched my jaw. Ryan's eyes flickered back to me, doubt creeping in. He wanted to believe her. Of course, he did. She was good at this. Good at twisting the truth. I had seen it before on nights when she made me feel like I was imagining things. When she gaslit me into believing I was the crazy one. Not this time. I let out a breath, forcing a bitter chuckle. Ryan, buddy, do yourself a favor. He hesitated. I lifted my chin toward the desk drawer behind Jessica. Check the folder. Jessica's body tensed. Her nails dug into Ryan's sleeve. Ryan, don't. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had already been planted. Ryan stepped around her, reaching for the drawer. Jessica's breath hitched. Ryan. Too slow. He pulled it open. His eyes scanned the first page, and then his face drained of color. Offshore accounts. Transactions. And at the very bottom, the life insurance policy. For a long, excruciating second, he just stared at it. And then, Jessica, what the hell is this? Jessica's entire demeanor changed. The fake warmth evaporated. Her shoulders squared, like a cornered animal. Ryan, put that away, she said, voice tight. But Ryan shook his head, gripping the papers. You were setting him up. You were setting me up. His voice was rising, panic creeping in. Jessica took a slow step toward him, hands outstretched. Baby, listen. He flinched away. No. You said you loved me. That we were gonna be together. Jessica's lips curled. And then, for the first time tonight, I saw the real her. Not the charming woman I had married. Not the seductive liar Ryan had fallen for. The cold, ruthless predator beneath it all. She tilted her head, smiling just enough to make my skin crawl. Oh, Ryan, she murmured, voice smooth as silk. Did you really think you were special? His breath caught. And in that moment, I knew. He finally understood. He wasn't her partner. He was her pawn. The realization shattered across his face. He looked at the folder, at her, then back to me, as if piecing everything together at once. And then, before Jessica could react, he grabbed his phone and started dialing 911. Jessica's eyes widened as Ryan lifted the phone to his ear. 911. What's your emergency? Her entire body tensed like a wild animal about to strike. Ryan. Her voice was low, almost hypnotic. Put the phone down. But Ryan, his hands trembling, took a step back, pressing the phone harder against his ear. Yes, I need the police. There's been an attack, and... Jessica lunged. With a speed that sent a bolt of shock through my aching ribs, she ripped the phone from his hand and flung it across the room. It smashed against the wall, pieces scattering like broken glass. Ryan stumbled back, his face going pale. Jessica straightened, adjusting her robe like she hadn't just destroyed evidence. Now look what you made me do, she murmured. I forced myself up onto one knee, ignoring the dizziness. Ryan, I breathed. Now you get it, don't you? He didn't answer. His gaze darted between Jessica and the broken phone, realization sinking in. He was in danger too. Jessica exhaled sharply. Jesus, you men are so dramatic. Ryan swallowed hard. Jessica, what the hell is wrong with you? She didn't even flinch. Nothing. You just weren't supposed to find out. Ryan shook his head, disbelief written across his face. So all of it was fake? His voice cracked. You never loved me? Jessica let out a soft, almost pitying laugh. Oh, Ryan. She stepped closer, dragging a manicured nail down his chest. You were fun, sweetheart. But love. She smirked. Love is for suckers. Ryan flinched like she had slapped him. And that's when I saw it, the shift in his eyes. Something inside him snapped. I recognized it because I had felt it too. The moment you realized the person you loved was never real. And just like that, Jessica lost control. Ryan's chest rose and fell, his breath heavy. You played me, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh, don't get all self-righteous now, honey. You knew I was married, and that didn't stop you. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. For the first time that night, she miscalculated. She had spent years twisting people around her little finger, making them do whatever she wanted. But Ryan? Ryan was younger, hot-headed, less controlled. and she had just ripped his ego to shreds. His jaw tightened. "You used me," he said, voice rising. I gave up everything for you." Jessica sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "Oh my God, enough with the theatrics, Ryan. You weren't my first, and you won't be my last." Ryan's face twisted in rage. His arm lashed out. For a split second, I thought he was going to hit her. But Jessica, always one step ahead, ducked. His fist crashed into the lamp beside her, sending it flying. The room exploded in shadows, the only light now flickering from the fireplace. "Oh, real mature," Jessica barked. Ryan was breathing hard, shaking, his whole body vibrating with fury. Jessica smirked. "See? You're just like him," she said, jerking her chin toward me. "Pathetic. Weak. Predictable." Ryan's nostrils flared. He took a step toward her, and she reached behind her back. My stomach dropped, because I knew that movement. I had seen it 100 times at the shooting range. Jessica's hand came back into view, holding a gun. Both Ryan and I froze. She tilted her head, twirling the weapon between her fingers, her expression eerily calm. Ryan staggered back. "Oh, relax," she muttered. "I'm not going to shoot you." Then she pointed it at me. Ryan inhaled sharply. "Jessica." She didn't even glance at him. Her focus was locked onto me. "You should have left well enough alone, Daniel," she murmured. "I gave you so many chances." I forced my voice to stay steady. "And yet, here we are." Her finger twitched over the trigger. Ryan's gaze flickered between us, sweat forming on his brow. "Jessica," he said carefully, "put the gun down." Her lips curled. "Why? So you can call the cops?" Ryan swallowed. "No one has to call anyone. We can." She laughed. "Oh, Ryan, you still think you have a say in this?" Ryan's jaw locked. And that's when I saw it. The shift in him. A new kind of realization. He had been a fool. He had believed every lie, every whispered promise. But now? Now, he wasn't going to be a pawn anymore. Jessica was still focused on me, which meant she didn't see what was coming. Ryan moved first. Ryan lunged at her, knocking the gun sideways just as she fired. The bullet whizzed past my ear, hitting the bookshelf behind me. Jessica screamed, thrashing against him, but Ryan was younger, stronger, angrier. They struggled, bodies crashing against furniture, the gun swinging wildly between them. I didn't hesitate. Ignoring the pain in my ribs, I threw myself forward. Jessica shrieked as I grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard. The gun clattered to the floor. Ryan kicked it away. Jessica, now weaponless, went feral. She clawed at Ryan's face, raking her nails down his cheek, drawing blood. He yelped, shoving her back, his chest heaving. She stumbled, eyes darting between us, realizing for the first time she had lost. "Stay down, Jessica," I warned. Her breath hitched. For a moment, just a brief moment, she looked, afraid. Ryan wiped the blood from his cheek, glaring at her. "You were going to kill him," he muttered, almost to himself. "You were actually going to do it." Jessica opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to spin another lie. But then, sirens. Her face went white. The faint glow of red and blue lights flickered outside the window. Ryan exhaled sharply. I guess someone heard the gunshot. Jessica's hands shook. For the first time that night, she had no words. No escape. No control. I straightened, chest rising and falling, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was over. Jessica had finally lost the game. The sirens grew louder, flashing lights cutting through the night like a warning, a signal that Jessica's reign was finally over. She stood frozen, her fingers twitching at her sides, her pupils blown wide like an animal caught in headlights. I took a step toward her. "What now, Jessica?" My voice was low, steady. She knew there was no way out. Ryan, still panting from the struggle, wiped his bloodied cheek. He was glaring at her, his expression torn between rage and disbelief. "You were actually going to kill him," he muttered again, like he still couldn't wrap his head around it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jessica's lips parted, but for the first time in her manipulative life, she had no response. The knock on the door was firm. "Police. Open up." Jessica flinched. Then something in her face shifted. The fear in her eyes melted away, and in its place came something I had seen before. Calculations. Jessica always had a plan. And even now, backed into a corner, she was thinking. Before either Ryan or I could react, Jessica's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, her body curling in on itself as she let out a broken sob. Ryan and I exchanged looks. "What the?" The second knock came, louder this time. "Police." We will enter by force if necessary. Jessica turned to Ryan, her mascara-streaked face filled with terror. Ryan, she whimpered, her voice trembling. Please. Please help me. I stiffened. Ryan froze. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to make Ryan her escape. Ryan hesitated, his lips pressing into a tight line. I could see the war inside him. She had just tried to kill me. She had played him like a fool. And yet, he had loved her. Maybe still did. Jessica reached for his wrist, her touch featherlight. Ryan, she whispered. If they take me, I'll never get out. They'll lock me away forever. Ryan swallowed hard. Jessica. I made a mistake. Her voice cracked. I lost control. But I love you so much. She played the words like a song, soft, desperate, so believable it made my skin crawl. Ryan's jaw clenched. And for a split second, I thought he was going to fall for it. Then, I moved first. I grabbed Ryan's shoulder and yanked him back. Jessica's eyes flared with fury. Snap out of it, Ryan. I hissed. She's lying to you. Again. Ryan looked at me, then at Jessica, his expression torn. Jessica saw the hesitation. So she played her final card. She lunged for the gun. I barely had time to react, Ryan did. He kicked it across the floor, sending it spinning beneath the couch. Jessica screamed in frustration. The front door burst open. 3 officers rushed in, weapons drawn. Hands where we can see them. Jessica snapped. In an instant, her entire body language shifted. She turned to the cops, eyes brimming with tears, pointing straight at me. Help? He tried to kill me. Ryan and I both froze. The officers hesitated, glancing between us. Jessica wasn't done. He broke into my house, she sobbed. I tried to fight him off, but he attacked Ryan. He was going to kill us both. Ryan sucked in a breath. What the hell? Jessica kept going, her performance flawless. He's my ex-husband. He's obsessed with me. I left him, but he wouldn't let go. He has a history of violence. One of the officers turned to me. Sir, put your hands behind your head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica was turning this on me. Ryan's eyes darted between Jessica and me, his mind racing. This was it. If Ryan said nothing, if he hesitated for even a second, Jessica would win. I needed him to choose. Now, Jessica locked eyes with him. Ryan's hands trembled at his sides. She could still reel him in. I could see it. One wrong move, and I was done. Ryan took a deep breath, then turned to the cops. She's lying. Jessica's breath hitched. Ryan stepped forward, shoulders squared. He's my boss. I was the one sleeping with his wife, he admitted, voice raw. But he didn't attack us. Jessica did. Jessica's lips parted. The officers exchanged glances. You're saying she's the threat here? Ryan nodded. She tried to shoot him. Jessica's entire body went stiff. Ryan wasn't her puppet anymore. The lead officer glanced at me. Sir, do you want to press charges? I stared at Jessica, at the woman I had once loved. The woman who had shattered every ounce of trust, twisted every word, every truth. But now, she had nothing left. I nodded. Yes. Jessica collapsed. It was over. 2 officers restrained her, one reading her rights as they cuffed her wrists. Her head snapped toward Ryan. Ryan, don't do this. Ryan didn't flinch. She turned to me next, pure venom in her voice. You'll regret this. I held her gaze. No, Jessica. You will. She thrashed as they dragged her toward the door, screaming every curse she could muster. And then, silence. Ryan exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand down his face. I stared at the shattered room around us, my chest aching not just from the fight, but from everything. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. Well, that was a hell of a night. I smirked, shaking my head. Understatement of the year. The reality sank in. Jessica was gone. The damage she had done? That would take time to heal. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. Ryan glanced at me. You gonna be okay? I sighed, stretching my sore limbs. Ask me in a week. Ryan chuckled, nodding. We stood there, watching as the cop's car disappeared down the street. Jessica had finally lost her game. And I had won my freedom. But the real question was, the house felt different after Jessica was taken away. The air was lighter, but the weight in my chest hadn't disappeared yet. The shattered glass on the floor, the overturned chair, the smeared blood on the tiles, each one was a reminder of how close things had come to spiraling out of control. My body ached from the fight, my knuckles still raw from colliding with Ryan's jaw earlier in the night. But the pain was nothing compared to the storm inside my head. Jessica was gone. Really gone. No more lies, no more deceit, no more manipulations. Yet, even after everything, her voice still echoed in my mind. The venom in her last words, the sheer hatred in her eyes. Even in defeat, she had tried to convince herself she wasn't the problem. Ryan stood near the kitchen counter, rubbing his face with both hands. He looked as exhausted as I felt. His lip was still bleeding from where I had hit him, and his shirt was stained with dried sweat and Jessica's perfume. He wasn't the enemy anymore. Maybe he never really was. Just another piece in Jessica's twisted game. I didn't offer him sympathy, though. He had played his part. He had known she was married, had known exactly what he was getting into. And yet, he let himself fall into her trap. The regret was all over his face now, but I had no energy left to tell him it wasn't enough. We stood in silence for a long time. Eventually, Ryan was the one who broke it. She ruined both of us, didn't she? He muttered, shaking his head. His voice was hollow. She didn't love either of us. Not really. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked over to the window, staring out at the flashing lights in the distance. The police car was gone now. Jessica was probably sitting in the back of it, still cursing my name, still trying to find a way out. But this time, there wasn't one. She only loved control, I finally said. And we let her have it. Ryan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Yeah, we did. There was no point standing here any longer. The house was just a graveyard of bad memories now. I grabbed my keys from the counter and turned to Ryan. I need to get out of here. Ryan nodded slowly, like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he needed to escape just as much as I did. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Whatever happened to him now, whatever damage Jessica had left on his life, that was his burden to carry. Without another word, I walked out. The night air was cold against my bruised skin. I hadn't even noticed how hard my heart had been beating until I was outside, away from the chaos. Each step toward my car felt like shedding another layer of the past. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Who even was I now? For months, maybe even years, I had been living in Jessica's world. Trying to keep the marriage together, trying to be the husband she wanted, trying to ignore all the warning signs that had been screaming at me from the very beginning. And then, when the truth had come out, I had let the betrayal consume me. Anger, hatred, the need for revenge. I had become someone I barely recognized. And now that she was gone, what was left of me? I started the engine and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just let the road guide me, the city lights blurring past as my mind replayed every moment of the night. Every lie Jessica had told. Every time I had ignored the obvious. Every second I had wasted on someone who had never truly cared. At some point, I ended up near the water. A quiet spot just outside the city, where the waves crashed against the rocks, drowning out every other sound. I pulled over and stepped out, letting the wind whip through my hair, the cold seeping into my skin. This was what I needed. A moment to breathe. A moment to let go. For so long, I had been holding on to the anger, the betrayal, the need to make Jessica pay. And yes, I had one. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. But standing here, staring at the endless waves, I realized something else. Winning didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Because winning didn't erase the past. It didn't take back the wasted years, the nights spent wondering why I wasn't enough, the mornings waking up next to someone who had already checked out. It didn't fix the scars she had left. And it sure as hell didn't bring back the man I used to be. But maybe it didn't have to. Maybe the only thing left to do was start over. I don't know how long I stood there, just listening to the water. But when I finally turned back to my car, something felt different. The weight was still there, but it wasn't as heavy anymore. Jessica would never haunt me again. She would try, of course. I had no doubt she'd spin a million stories, try to find a way to make herself the victim. But it didn't matter, because I was done playing her game. I pulled out my phone and deleted her number. Then I scrolled through my photos and erased every trace of her. Every picture, every memory, every piece of the past that had been clinging to me like a parasite. And when I was done, I took one last deep breath and got back in the car. The road stretched ahead of me, open and endless. For the first time in a long time, I was free.